Hello, my dear students and other subscribers on my YouTube channel. Welcome to SJ's classes. This is my final lecture on the topic Indian aesthetics and also on the paper literary criticism. We went through the literary criticism of various sages as part of this exercise. We discussed some of the important critics of these sages and also analyzed their important contributions to the realm of English literary criticism through various concepts and movements. Please do refer to the other videos that I have posted on my YouTube channel to get an overall understanding regarding the literary criticism paper. This is my fourth video on Indian aesthetics. In the first video, I introduced to you the field of study called Indian aesthetics. In the second video, I discussed an important theory which forms the foundation of Indian aesthetics, which is the theory of rasa. And I did it with the help of S.N. Dasgupta's essay, The Theory of Rasa. In the third video, I discussed the concept called Alamgara with the help of V. Raghavan's essay, The Use and Abuse of Alamgara. And finally, in this video, I will elaborate a bit more on Indian aesthetics with the help of another extract from an important book titled Highways and Byways of Literary Criticism in Sanskrit, written by S. Kuppuswami Sastri. Before we move into the details of the essay, let's have a look at the biographical and literary information regarding the writer. Professor S. Kuppuswami Sastri was a reputed Sanskrit scholar in India who had devoted his lifetime to the study of Sanskrit and Indology. Indology refers to the study of the history, culture, languages, and literature of India. He was a professor, editor, and author in Sanskrit language. He was also a well-known literary figure in India and abroad. He contributed largely in many ways to the cause of Sanskrit learning, education, and research. Some of his notable works are Primer of Indian Logic, Highways and Byways of Literary Criticism in Sanskrit, and Compromises in the History of Advaitic Thought. The essay Highways of Literary Criticism in Sanskrit is taken from S.K. Shastri's work Highways and Byways of Literary Criticism in Sanskrit, published in 1993. In this essay, he writes about the synthesis between literary law and literary freedom, which is mainly achieved through Vyanjana or suggestion in literature. So this is the concept that we will look into as part of this video lesson as well as this particular essay, the concept called Vyanjana. Now let's look at the details of the essay. The extract begins with an allusion to the greatest of all Indian poets, Rabindranath Tagore, whom S.K. Shastri regards as an all-comprehensive and thoroughly Indian poet. By quoting Tagore, he attempts to point out the mutual relationship between literary law and literary freedom. So this is the very first thing that S.K. Shastri tries to point out, the relationship between literary law and literary freedom. Normally you don't associate laws with freedom. These are contrary elements. When there are laws, there will be restrictions. There won't be any sort of freedom. But here in this essay, at the very outset, S.K. Shastri tries to connect between these two opposite concepts. He says, a poem may be bound by strict laws, but its beauty transcends the restrictions imposed by these rules. Literary laws actually form the wings with which the poem flies into freedom. Let's try to understand these this particular point of view of S.K. Sastri with an example. For example, while attempting to write a Petrarchan sonnet, you might have to stick on to a defined set of rules like 14 lines divided into a sestet and octave, a definite rhyme scheme. Now, these laws might seem to curb your freedom in the act of poetic creation. But according to S.K. Sastri, these rules are what renders the poetic creation beautiful. It is these rules that carry it to freedom. He says that law is the first step towards freedom. But absolute freedom without law is very dangerous. Therefore, we always make a synthesis or a combination of ideas into a complex whole. That is what the verb synthesis here means. A combination of ideas into an organized complex whole. Therefore, we always make a synthesis between law and liberty in our social life. Similarly, there is a synthesis between law and liberty in literature for the attainment of beauty. This liberty is achieved in literature by the principle of Vyanjana or suggestion. So how does a synthesis between law and liberty occur in literature? S.K. Sastri says it is through Vyanjana or suggestion. Let us look at more details regarding this concept called Vyanjana. Vyanjana is an extraordinary significative power which all works of art possess. It is suggestion in poetry and forms an important principle in the field of literary criticism. It is by the recognition and acceptance of the principles of Vyanjana that liberty is achieved in literature. S.K. Sastri further quotes philosophers like Benedetto Croce and Jespersen to state that from the point of view of an ordinary speaker, there is something suggestive and artistic even in an ordinary sentence, and this happens as a result of the inherent artistic capacity that every intelligent being possesses. Jespersen, in his work The Philosophy of Grammar, states that in all speech there are three important things. They are expression, suppression, and impression. Jespersen opines that impression is often produced by suppression. So no matter what statement you make, Jespersen says that there is always some sort of suppression involved in it. Even in an ordinary sentence, the element of suppression cannot be avoided. The greatness of great writers lie in their work's degree of suppression. S.K. Sastri brings down this idea to the concept of suggestion in poetry and states that Vyanjana too is impression through suppression. So in poetry or in a work of art, there is a lot of suppression involved. And this suppression is what creates suggestion or Vyanjana. There is nothing so boring as expressing everything. There ought to be some kind of suppression to give it suggestion. So only when you suppress something, then it can give something which is suggested. If you express everything, then S.K. Sastri says that there is nothing so boring as completely expressing what you have in your mind. The beauty of a poem comes from Vyanjana or suggestion, which in turn comes from suppression. Vyanjana or suggestion helps you in getting rid of the boredom that arises from expressing everything. It forms the bridge which carries the art from the Kavi to the Sahrudaya. In the absence of Vyanjana, a work of art becomes as good as a failure. Vyanjana can therefore be regarded as the central principle of literary criticism in Sanskrit, or the pivotal doctrine around which the whole scheme of art criticism in Sanskrit revolves. According to Kuppuswami Sastri, in genuine poetry, a beautiful thought is skillfully suppressed by the poet with artistic ornamented lines leading to suggestion or Vyanjana, which gives the reader a wonderful impression. So this is where he quotes Jesperson's theory of suppression. He says that in genuine poetry, a beautiful thought is skillfully suppressed. And this is done by the poet by using ornamented lines. And this leads to suggestion or Vyanjana, which gives the reader a wonderful impression. So this clarifies the theory put forth by Jesperson in his work The Philosophy of Grammar, that there are three things in a speech: expression, suppression, and impression, and that impression is often produced by suppression. Therefore, the presence of Vyanjana, suggestion, it forms the highest test of true poetry according to S.K. Sastri. Now let's look at yet another concept that he ponders on in the extract. The essay then differentiates between literary form and literary content. Let us try to understand how S.K. Sastri differentiates between these two. He says that literary art involves two important aspects: form and content. Ordinary words grouped in an artistic way constitute form according to Sastri. So when words are arranged in an artistic way, according to S.K. Sastri, this constitute form, literary form. Elements such as gunas mean quality or merit of a work of art. Alamgaras, what we saw in the previous video lesson, decorations, adornments, embellishments that you use in a work of art. Ridi, which means style. So elements such as gunas, alamgaras, ridi, etc. are associated with literary form. Now let's look at literary content. The sense conveyed by the work of art, which is both beautiful and charming at the same time, is referred to as content by Sastri. So the sense that is conveyed, which is both beautiful and charming, appealing for the reader, for the recipient, that is what is termed as literary content by S.K. Sastri. Elements like Dhvani. Dhvani means suggestive poetry. Now it is in Anandavardhana's Dhvaniloga that the concept of Dhvani has been detailed. Dhvaniloga is an epoch-making work in the history of Indian literary criticism. The Indian aestheticians have given 5 different meanings to the word Dhvani. The words that are suggestive of emotions, you can treat them as Dhvani. The artha or meaning suggested, a vastu or fact, an alamgara or figure of speech, and the rasa or the aesthetic relish suggested by the words, the suggestive power of the word, the poem which contains the suggestion of rasa. So these are the 5 different meanings that have been attributed to the word Dhvani by Indian aestheticians. Anandavardhana speaks of 3 kinds of Dhvani on the basis of suggestiveness. One is suggestiveness in the form of fact or vastu Dhvani. So the second is suggestiveness in the form of poetic figures of speech or alamgara Dhvani. And the third is suggestiveness in the form of emotion or rasa Dhvani. So Dhvani is basically suggestive poetry. So elements like Dhvani, rasa, anumana. Anumana means inference, what you infer from a work of art. Anumana form a part of literary content. So this is how he distinguishes between literary form and literary content. Now coming to the third concept that has been explored by S.K. Sastri in this particular work of art. S.K. Sastri also elaborates the concept called Vakroti in this essay. Vakroti means indirect expression or a deviation of expression from the ordinary. Now, there has been an attempt from the Indian aestheticians or some of the Indian aestheticians to interpret Vakroti as eccentric expression. S.K. Sastri is against the interpretation of Vakroti as eccentric expression. For him, Vakroti is a deviation in expression from the commonplace. These deviations may be due to various causes, but when the deviation is effective, it is termed Vakroti. It was Kuntaga, a 11th century Sanskrit literary critic, who developed the idea of Vakroti. Kuntaga insisted that it is Vakroti or deviant speech which is the life of poetry, and this distinguishes it from scientific or natural means of expressing facts. The concluding part of the essay focuses on Anandavardhana's contributions to the development of Vyanjana. He states that Anandavardhana made extensive researches on the principles of Vyanjana, and on the basis of his research, he divided poetry into three classes such as Uttama or the best, Madhyama, the middle, and Attama, the third class. Now, all this classification is done on the basis of the principle of Vyanjana or with regard to Vyanjana. Uttama allows the suggested element or Vyanjana to reign supreme and never allows itself to be subordinated to anything else. So in this kind of poetry, the Vyanjana or that which is suggested, it reigns supreme. It is what is superior most in that particular work of art. Madhyama class of poetry, in which the suggested element is not raised to the supreme rank, but at the same time there is minimum degree of agreeableness, beauty, and attractiveness. In Attama poetry, the suggested element is allowed to lie hidden or buried. Anandavardhana says that the central principle of Vyanjana or suggestion unites poetry and can be used as the leading principle of art criticism and as the source of literary beauty. S.K. Sastri adds that the language of poetry is different from that of ordinary discourse. It is characterized by Vyanjana or suggestion, a sort of immediate inference. This can be a process associated with artistic expression itself. It is ordinary or unique, hence logottara. The process of artistic creation is not a worldly process. It is not laugiga, it is alaugiga. It is not a worldly process. It is something which is very much alaugiga. It involves suppression and it gives readers delight. That is where the essay ends. So thank you so much for watching this video lesson. I hope you have an idea regarding what Vyanjana or suggestion in poetry is, and also some of the other concepts that have been explored by S.K. Sastri in this essay, like Vakroti, literary form, literary content, and also Anandavardhana's contributions to the realm of Vyanjana. Thank you so much.